many of us can quote back and forth the ideas of Rav Kook. Many of us can quote back and forth his life story and ideas that have influenced us, but really spending the time in the text and understanding his words and his ideas is not only spiritually nourishing and intellectually challenging, but helpful for our times in so many ways. And I don't need to make that case because I think we all know it. And someone who has thrown his life into the thought and life of Rav Kook, immersed his life, intertwining it with his legacy and text. What a zchut, a merit to learn with someone like that. Israeli-born Rabbi Yitzchak Evan-Shayish, also Marmerstein, is a longtime student and teacher of Torah Rav Kook. He is the Gabbai and educator at Beit Rav Kook, which I imagine is where he is right now, Rav Kook's historical home and study center in Jerusalem. He's also the chairman of Orla Raya, a Jerusalem-based organization dedicated to sharing Rav Kook's illuminated teachings and vision with the largest possible audience. He has a special interest in translating and presenting Rav Kook's incredible poetry. And I have to say, we thought this was so worth it that this is the first time we're doing a 10-part series. We have always done kind of one-offs, and this is going to be a 10-part series. If you go to the registration page, see there's a different theme, 10 different themes for each session, and we will have the sources up on the screen, so you can be learning those. You can see the Hebrew. We can learn from the English, and a chance to dive in. You can use the chat on the side if you want to share thoughts or questions between now and the Q&A part, and the presenter may choose to bring you in as well between now and then. So Rabbi Yitzchak Evan-Shayish, thank you for being with us.
Shalom Aleichem. Aleichem shalom to everybody. I can't tell you how I'm glad to have this opportunity to share with you. And I wish I was at Beit Rav Kook, but it's more than 1,000 meters from my house. And I'm in my apartment in Katamon in Yerushalayim. And when the conditions allow it, I'll be happy to do this class actually from Beit Rav Kook. But with your permission, we'll begin by, I'll just take you into the text. I've got different texts and I'll explain the thematic framework that we're going to be learning Torah Rav Kook with. But we begin by really letting the ha'orot, the lights of Rav Kook, speak to us, speak with us. Lahashe ha'havaya, the whispers of existence. Tilchash li sod ahavaya kula. All existence whispers to me its secret. Chaim li yesh, kach, na, kach. I have life to offer. Take, please take. Im yesh lecha lev ubalev dam shera'al yeush lo zihamahu. If you have a heart, and in your heart red blood is flowing that has not been poisoned by the toxins of despair. Ve'im libatcha arela. But if your heart is uncircumcised, covered, ve'yof'i lo yaksimecha, and my beauty does not entrance you, tilchash li ahavaya, existence whispers to me, Surah meni surah areni lecha lach asura, away from me, away. To you I am closed, locked, forbidden. Surah meni surah areni lecha lach asura. Im kol tziftzuf adin, if every gentle sound, kol yofi chai, every living beauty, lo hadar shirat kodesh, does not bring us to holy song, ach zerem esh zara, but instead awakens in you a stream of strange fire, esh zara. Surah meni surah hareini lecha asura. Away from me, away. I am forbidden to you. V'dor yakum v'chai. And a generation will awaken and come alive. Yashir leyofi v'chaim, sing to beauty and to life. Ve'edna blidai yinak mital shamayim, and bliss without limit. Edna, Eden, limitless Eden. We will draw, suckle from the dew of heaven. A generation will awaken, come to life, sing to beauty and to life, and draw unending delight from the dew of heaven. Umihadar Carmel v'Sharon shifat razei havaya. And from the vistas of the Carmel and the valleys of the Sharon will flow the wealth of life's secrets, the secrets of existence. Takshiv ozen amchai, will be heard by the ears of a nation alive. This is from the Weizmann Institute to Haifa. Takshiv ozen amchai. The secrets of existence will be heard by the ears of a people alive, a nation alive. Eden shira ve'yefi chaim or kodesh yimale, and from the Eden of her song and the beauty of her life, a holy light will fill all. Ve'ahavaya kula lo tedovev, and then existence will murmur lovingly to us, to him, to the person, Bechiri, my beloved, the one who chose me. Hareini lecha muteret. I am permitted to you. I am yours. I am yours. Dor yakum v'chai yashir leyofi v'chaim. So I want to bless us that we understand that we are the generation, Dor Yakum v'chai, who is being invited to sing the Yofi v'chaim ve'edna bli da yinak mital shamayim, and to really draw unending delight from the dew of heaven. Bimheira beyamenu, because life is always whispering to us. Tel chash li sod ahavaya kula. Chaim li yesh kach na kach. I have life to offer. Take, please take. Meshorer hatshuva, hanoladet כבר, poet of our return. Have you been born yet? Ve'im b'shchakim odena tzrura shama nishmatcha, and if you're still in the heights, your soul bound up in the treasure of life, b'tzrura chaim, mehira reda ve'orer kinocha, quickly descend, come down and awaken your violin. Yishma'u kol dak elev, all the depressed of heart will hear. Ya'azinu kol arle ruach, all the uncircumcised of spirit will give ear. Lehemyat nevalecha, to the melody of your harp, and they will return, and they will live. V'shavu v'chayu. So we are blessed because Meshorer HaTshuva the poet of our return, Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was born in 1865 in Griev, Lithuania. His mother was Chabad, connected to the Tzemach Tzedek, and his father a Kohen, and is quickly recognized as a young person that he was an extraordinary soul. And he went to the Volozhin Yeshiva at the age of 18, and he went through Shas 17 times in the year and a half he was there. He was the only person allowed to wear tefillin all day long. And when all the other superstars there asked, well, they asked the Rosh Yeshiva, the Netziv. And this was the yeshiva where Rav Soloveitchik, the Netziv's son-in-law, was starting the brisk method, as it were. And Rav Kook was right in that circle. He was with the Netziv and not less into Pilpul. At the age of 23, the Chafetz Chaim sat him down. Chafetz Chaim already got to know him from when he was younger, and the Chafetz Chaim sat him down, and he says, I have two requests. The first is, I'm a Kohen, you're a Kohen, maybe not my lifetime, hopefully yours. The Kohanim have to know what to do. Please learn the Hilchot of the Beit HaMikdash and all the Kohanic practices. He was just starting there the movement of Kohanim learning Hilchot Beit HaMikdash and the Temple Mount movement. There was the Chafetz Chaim that gave birth to it in the 1880s. And he said to Rav Kook, though, you can learn it on your own. You don't have to learn it with anybody else. And Rav Kook already knew it all. And then the second request he told him is, I have another request, but please answer, please agree to do it before I ask you. And Rav Kook said, okay, you're the Rebbe. And he said to him, and this is a bit of a paraphrase, but it's the implications of the whole situation. But he did it mostly. He said, it's clear that you're the Talmid Chacham of world history, ultimately, because he was integrating all the Torah that preceded him. He was considered the Yoresh of Vilna, of Torah Gaon, Ramchal. He's really in the line of the line going back to the Ramchal, Ari, and further back to the Beit HaMikdash ultimately. But and he said, it's clear you're the Talmid Chacham of our history, and every yeshiva in the world wants you to be a Rosh Yeshiva. No, you have to be a rabbi in Israel, for Israel. And at the age of 23, he sent him out to be a community rabbi. And he did that till he was 39 years old, and then he came to Israel in 1904 to be the chief rabbi of Yafo. And then in 1914, he was outside of the country and met his main student. And I'm about to tell you that story, but I just want to take a little bit of a personal focus and explain to you why I got so involved with Torah to Rav Kook. I'm born in Israel, and my parents, Holocaust survivors from Romania, Transylvania. And I grew up with the consciousness that something very dark had happened in human history. And I felt I wanted to respond in some way that was a response of light in the face of all this darkness. And that sort of guided my own search. And my return to get serious about the Torah, and there's a whole story there, but I was teaching Jewish high school in 1980 in Winnipeg, Canada. And I got not exactly this book, but just like this book, but in soft cover as a birthday present. It's Abraham Isaac Kook by Ben Zion Boxer. It's a wonderful translation, and it's really it's a great book to have. And I sat down one day in the summer and I started to read. And as I read, and I already knew of Rav Kook a little bit before, I had used his text in previous places I had been teaching before, but it's the first time I really just sat down just to read it, lishma. And as I read, I felt viscerally that I stepped into a larger understanding. This is a larger thought space. It is a larger understanding, but I felt it viscerally. I felt almost my sense of, wow, there's so much more room for thought in his perspective, and so much illumination that it became, this is the most illuminated Torah presentation that I'd ever entered. And so I've really been reading it ever since. And the people around him who we'll talk about, but the basic conclusion is that he came 1914, he was in Europe. 1919, he came back to Israel, and he was the Chief Rabbi of Jerusalem and then of Israel till his passing in 1935. They did a survey for Israel's the 65th Yom Ha'atzmaut. Who's the person most influential on shaping the modern state of Israel? Ben Gurion was number 2. Rav Kook, number 1. His impact is only getting larger. His teachings are only now coming out more fully. There's much of his writing wasn't even published 10 years ago. Some of his most important creative writing. And I'll tell you more about that. There's some fascinating books, that extraordinary thing. And the people around him came to the conclusion that he was experiencing prophecy. And we'll talk about that more. But yeah, so now in terms of how to present the Torah of Rav Kook in a way that's both gives the breadth and the depth, it makes a lot of sense to do it based on the understanding of Rav Kook's Talmid Muvhak. Rav Kook had a Talmid Muvhak, his prime student, and I want to introduce you, if you don't already know. In my understanding, there's 2 spiritual giants of our time. Rav Kook, who's one, his Talmid Muvhak, Rabbi David HaCohen, my understanding is the second major soul and thinker of modern Jewish history. And anybody not familiar with him, or somewhat, or not very much in the circle? But it's an extraordinary story. He grew up, he's also a Kohen, and he grew up learning, and also from Radin. His uncle was the chief rabbi of Radin, living right near the Chafetz Chaim. And he went to get a general education. He wanted to search out the world's wisdom, and he went to get his PhD in philosophy. And this is in 1912, 1913. And at the beginning of the First World War, he is arrested as a Russian citizen in Germany. And he gets sent to Switzerland. Rav Kook happens to be in Germany at the same time because he was invited to address the gathering of Agudat Yisrael, the union of rabbis, and he was going to speak to them about the importance of Israel and change their perspective about sending people to Israel. And Aryeh Levine, the Tzaddik of Jerusalem, who's Rav Kook had 3 or 4 central students. The Rav Nazir was the major. Aryeh Levine, the Tzaddik of Jerusalem, was the other one of them. And there's Rav Harlap and Rav Kook's son. That's the primary circle of 4 people around Rav Kook. But Aryeh Levine explained that World War I happened so that this meeting between Rav Kook and the rabbis of Europe never happened because Amalek steps in when the chance for tikkun is so strong. Rav Kook could have had a tremendous influence on the rabbis, and they would have started sending multitudes to Israel in the 20s, and we would have had the Medinat Israel in the 20s, and the Holocaust would have never happened. The Nazir, around that time, took on a Nazirite vow, which was to not cut his hair and not drink wine or grape products. He was also a vegetarian and didn't wear leather. So he's sort of like the first hippie of the 20th century. But his reason for doing it was because there's a medrash that Kedusha, Tahara, Nevuah, holiness, Tahara, which is Nezirut, the practices, the separation of the Nazir, prophecy. It's the stepping stone to prophecy, and that's what he was interested in. So he describes meeting Rav Kook, and here he is. I'll show you a picture of him as an elder. Here he is. He continued being a Nazir his entire life. He was the first person that came to the Kotel in 1967, along with the Rav Shlomo Goren was his son-in-law, and so forth. There's a lot more detail, but you can read all about it. But for our purposes, I want to introduce you to Rav Kook's thought through his perspective, and basically, he describes meeting Rav Kook. He says, we were both in Switzerland. I asked, can I come and see you? Rosh Chodesh Elul, he comes to see Rav Kook, and they have a conversation in the evening about Greek philosophy, which he says, didn't satisfy him too much. He knew about Greek philosophy in the Greek. And he said, but Rav Kook asked him invited him to spend the evening there. And in the morning, he describes, he got up and he heard Rav Kook davening in the room above him. And he was davening the early part of the Akdamot, where the Akedat Yitzchak, the sacrifice of Yitzchak, in the early part of the Siddur. This was Rosh Chodesh Elul. And he describes that בברכות השחר, תפילת העקדה בשיר וניגון עליון, in a melody, in a song, in an elevated melody, משמי שמי קדם. It came from the heavens, the primal heavens. וזכר לנו אהבת הקדמונים, and it reminded me of the love of the primary love. The akshiv, so he was outside the door. Rav Kook was davening by himself. The Nazir was outside the room, and he's just listened. And he describes it, the akshiv, and I listened. Vehine nehefachti vehaiti leish acher. Behold, I was transformed. I became a different human being. And then he describes, he quickly went to write his friend, more than I could ever imagine. I found my teacher. I found my Rav. And at that moment, their souls were so connected. And then when Rav Kook came to Israel to be the Chief Rabbi of Jerusalem, one of the first things he did was he called for the Nazir to come. He didn't finish his PhD, and he came to be with Rav Kook in Jerusalem. And they began the work of building this Central Universal Yeshiva. The Nazir wrote the curriculum for Yeshivat Merkazit Olamit, which now is known as Merkaz Arav, though his full curriculum was never fully applied yet. It's an extraordinary, it's just an extraordinary curriculum. for its breadth and depth and multi-leveled learnings. So the scene is 1922. The Nazir comes up and he's at Rav Kook's house, where I'll show you one day where this conversation took place. He came to Rav Kook and he said to him, "It's clear there's holiness with you. There's some special treasure. Is there also a content of study? Is there a methodology? Is there something that, do you have a shita? Do you have a method?" And Rav Kook said, "Yes, certainly." And he gave him 8 notebooks that he had been writing in his Yafo period from 1904, 4 notebooks from 1904 till 1914, and then 4 other notebooks that were written during the First World War till 1919, that his writings of his thoughts. He gave those to the Nazir, and the Nazir then sat down with them for the next 12, 13 years, going through them and creating a structure for the thought of Rav Kook in a thematic way. That Rav Kook was the complete free right brain. The Nazir was like his left brain, putting it into a philosophic framework. And the framework, and what I want to do is follow the main principle, because in volume 2 of it, he says that to understand Rav Kook in the most whole and deepest way, there's 5 foundational principles. There's 5 foundational principles to his thought, and they are, and he names them, HaKodesh HaKlali, the universal, all-encompassing holy. Everything is holy. 2, Achayuta Olamit, the universal livingness. Everything is alive. 3, and all of this you'll be getting notes. You don't have to write it down if you don't want to. Achduta Kolelet, the collective, all-encompassing, universal oneness. Achduta Kolelet. The 4th is Hatov HaKlali, the collective, universal good. What about bad? Well, it's dealt with in that section. And the 5th one is Hit'aluta Olam, the elevation of existence, the ongoing elevation of the world. And it's in that section where he has a piece that says, evolution, which is currently gaining acceptance in the world, is the secular science closest in harmony to Kabbalah. That's what they're able to see in a small part of the physical world is true on all levels, and he continues to elaborate. So those are the 5 foundations. And then volume 2 of Orot HaKodesh, the Nazir divided into these 5 foundational principles and brought pieces of Rav Kook on that theme. And what I would like to share with you is selections for the next 5 weeks, selections from each foundation in one of the things, and I'll always try to bring in the beginning of and the last one, because the way the Nazir structured it, he put them in a certain order to give a complete picture of what this foundation is about and what its implications are, and so on and so forth. So, and what I've done is condensed the text, and we'll see how much of it. I have a bit of a sense of timing today, but okay. So everybody's with me, and all right. This is such an unusual format. I'm so used to, all of us, we all know, right? It's such an unusual format, but for text, it's actually quite good for sharing text. I found it, I have a class every day at 7 where we're going through Rav Kook's Guide to the Perplexed, New Guide to the Perplexed. I can send you info on it. It's an extraordinary book that nobody even knew about until 10 years ago. And all right, but we'll get to that on its own time. So now I want to take you to
Rabbi, so we're going to
Yeah.
leave the last roughly 10 to 15 minutes for questions, right?
Right.
Excellent.
Okay. So what I'll do to make, okay, let's see, here we are. All right, so I'm gonna sort of walk you through it. And some of it, so he starts off the Nazir, he calls Orot HaKodesh Bet, the category is HaKodesh HaKlali, the Universal Holiness. And then he quotes a piece of Zohar to frame everything. And it's also a teaching, Rav Kook's teachings are completely based on in Kabbalah. He's the ultimate expansion of Kabbalah, drawing from the very core of Kabbalah. And he quotes a portion in the Zohar where it says, Kodesh milah begramiyahu, that holiness, the holy, is just in and of itself. It's its own category. Everything comes from the holy. And so what is holy? Holy is shleimuta dekula. It's the full completeness, complete wholeness of everything. And it's also called Chachma Il'ah, the highest wisdom. So holy and Chachma, Kadosh, the Kodesh and the Chachma is connected. And then it says, and even though the holy is hidden, and that's Kodesh, holy emanates below and Akre Kedusha, and brings Kedusha into the world. So the holy is the source of Kedusha. We experience Kedusha, holiness. So that's the quote that he starts the whole piece. And then he, in his, what he's done is basically categorize the themes in the 25 root concepts that now the pieces that follow, they're actually, he summarizes it to the max. And so he says like this, what we're looking at is that the Kodesh HaKlali, the universal holy, which is essential only of itself, habilti nigdar, it cannot be bounded, it has no limitation. Tzafui, it can be envisioned, observed, b'kedusha haklalit, in the universal holiness, hamagamatit, the purposeful, hamitpashetet be'adam u'be'olam, that spreads into humanity and into the world. So the Kodesh is beyond all limitation, but it comes down into Kedusha and comes into our life. HaKedusha ha'olamit. The Kodesh is Klali, Kedusha is Olamit. And what is the Kedusha Olamit? He ma'ala et hachol laKodesh. It raises the profane to the holy. He HaKedusha shebeteva. This is the holiness that's in the natural realm, hamitgala be'eretz kodesh, that can be revealed, is discovered in the Holy Land, the land of Israel. The holiness that's the natural realm revealed in the Holy Land. So that's the general construct. And then the volume, this whole section has two sub-chapters. Chapter 1 is a Kodesh HaKlali. Chapter 2 is a Kedusha HaOlamit. And he has about 13 pieces from Rav Kook in each one of them. So it's about 25, 26 pieces. Sometimes the specific number is significant. But this is the playing field, as it were. The relationship between the universal unbounded coming into the world, the holy unbounded coming into the world and raising the world to the holy. Okay, so now this is the first piece that he starts with. And this piece, it's a little bit, I feel an obligation to start with it. It's all right, because it's the beginning one. HaKodesh HaAtzmi, the essential holy. HaKodesh HaAtzmi hu HaChachma, the essential essence of holiness is wisdom. HaHakara levada, it's the recognition alone. It's nothing material. It's completely transcendent. Zohar idiyot ha'elyonot, that is the illumination of the highest ideas in their highest state. below shum hagbala, that has no limit, without any. And I'm going to translate. I'll read. What I did is I underlined the essence of each piece as a way. So we'll see how much our timing goes, but sometimes might be skipping, but you can follow along with me. But he's saying like this, that essential holiness in and of itself, it's in the realm of chachma, and it's pure wisdom. It has no limitation. It has no particular nature. Pratiyut shel tzivayon. It doesn't have a particular nature. Afilu shel klalei klaliot asher b'metziut. Even related to the largest, all-encompassing allness in reality, because hakol, everything in reality, uprati umugbar, is particular and it's limited. Legabe harocha v'hidvoliyut, hadvoliyut shel hachachma ha'elyona, compared to the expanse and the boundarylessness of the highest wisdom in its full power. And that's, so he's saying the Kodesh is, of course, the divine creation in the world. And so it's linked to the absolute, beyond all limitation. It's higher level than freedom. The kol chofesh v'cherut asher ba'olamim minateria. All freedom, liberation comes from it. Hakol kelo nechshav. Everything is considered as so much less. According to this pure, holy chachma. And then he takes it one step further. It's from this source, mimakor hachaim, from this source, shehu lemala min hachaim, which is beyond life, shoev Israel et rucho. Israel derives its spirit. This is where we're linking into in being Israel. Umima'al lekol archei olamim, and going beyond all the world's standards and values. Merachefu letafkido. We are soaring off to our purpose. Omnam kedei laha'ir ha'arat ha'chaim b'chol neshamot, in order to illuminate the glow of life in all the souls, b'kol merchavei olamei ad, in all the extensions of the world. Harei or HaKodesh shel hatochen hayesh, the light of the holy, in all that is, mofia be'ado b'melo kol alamim, is manifested in filling all the worlds, so that Israel, we have like the antennas, as it were, to understand that this Or HaKodesh, that all in existence is the flow from this Or HaKodesh. That's B'divrei Elohim Chaim. This is the matters and the words of the living God. All right, so then, one more point here, and I think in terms of the time, well, we'll see, but this is an important one to understand. What's the importance of being linked with the Kadosh and Kedusha? HaKedusha, and the piece is entitled HaKedusha HaElyonit HaKlalit, the highest universal holiness. HaKedusha HaElyonah, the highest holiness, when it manifests upon the individual and the collective, it establishes the person on the level of the highest will, that is manifested in all existence. When we're in touch with the Kedusha Elyonah, we're in touch with the Ratzon HaElyon. We're in touch with the divine will. And then we manifest all the limitations of existence. And that's what's so important about Kedusha Elyonah being our connector. And then we say, I'll read this just quickly, then our private will is not constricted and dark, sagur b'meitzarim, are closed in all sorts of limitations, because our own will, we're not limited to the t'naim ha'mitzumtzamim shel havaya, the limited conditions, the constricted conditions that most of the world accepts as reality. We're not limited by those conceptualizations, because then our own private will rises, olechu mazir le'en cheker, can illuminate beyond all measure, and then mitachedhu, our own private will unite bepnimei pnimiyut im ha'oneg ha'elyon, on the inner level with the highest level of bliss, ha'eden ha'elohi, the divine Edenic bliss, bechol milu'o v'tuvo, in all its goodness and fullness, that is hayored lahavaya b'kula b'shefa oro, that is descending to existence, to all of existence. And the word havaya is a beautiful word, right? It's yud hey vav hey in an order that we say it and the order that we experience it. Yud hey vav hey is giving us the havaya, this existence completely in the flow of the light. And Rav Kook is, of course, speaking from his own experience. His will, his ratzon, he was connected to the ratzon elyon, and therefore could describe the experience of going beyond one's own private, personal, closed experience. All right, so we're going to skip here. And then he says, so what does this have to do? How is this relevant to us? Kedusha, Kodesh, the holy, brings a flow of Kedusha into existence. So how does it affect us? So here he speaks very specifically. Or HaKodesh mitpashet betchila al koach hadibur. The light of holiness first extends over our power of speech. Shenaaseh kulo novea mima'ayan ha'chaim shel ha'kedusha, that our whole speech becomes an expression from the living wellspring of holiness. Hamefu'ara behod yifat chachmata v'zoach chayeha, that's splendorous in its glorious, beautiful wisdom and luminescent life. Rav Kook and we read this as extraordinary poetry. The scholars of Rav Kook point out how every single reference is to a specific sphira in the tree of life, and also it's all very, very, very detailed Kabbalistic, expanded Kabbalistic explanations. But his greatness is that without knowing any of that, we can get the essence of what he's saying. So first thing that holiness affects is how we speak. And then it elevates also our sense of hearing. That everything we hear, mitztaref leor gadol, is joined, is linked with a great light, tahor v'kadosh, pure and holy. And afterwards it spreads on our power of sight. Everything that we see, everything that our eyes see is sanctified, it is raised. And we can really analyze the world and bring an analysis of the world that's clear and actified. And barur v'tzalul are synonyms, right? But it's like clear and crystal clear. And then chaim kedoshim elyonim ve'birkat Hashem nisgevet lahavit tuva lekol asher yabit b'nei HaKodesh. And then the high holy life and the exalted blessing of God will just bring good to all who can see with the eyes of holiness. Ein Hashem el yireav lemeyachalim chasdo. It's a pasuk that the eye of God is on those who are yirah, and God is the eyes of God towards those that fear him, towards those that await for his mercy. And then once we've elevated our speech, our hearing, our sight, and then every movement, kol tnu'ah, kol regesh v'za'azua, every impulse becomes full of beautiful glory. We reach the level of hofa'at Or HaKodesh Gam Al Kol Kinyanav, the manifestation of the holy light on all our possessions. Al Kol Masha Mishtamesh Bem, every tool that we use. Maklo, our staff. Chamoro, our donkey. V'kol Asher Lo, and all that we have. All of that becomes the manifestation of holiness. And then we really are living on the way we should be living. Okay, so I want to finish in 4 minutes. So let me just share with you this piece. And we might start next week, return to this, but this is the last piece in this section. And we'll just do the beginning of it because it's called Nitzchon HaKodesh Be'olam. And this is the good news, considering all the bad news. And it's the victory of the holy in the world. And here Rav Kook says, and he's speaking here prophetically, Sof kol sof yinatzeach HaKodesh et ha'olam. Finally, the holy will be victorious in the world. החשבונות הפשוטים שגם לבבות של ילדים מרגישים באמיתתם, the simple basic understandings of being good and not stealing, and which children can just sense in their own true being, these simple, obvious truths, they'll be the foundation of our life. Eim hem yu yesodot hachaim. They'll be the foundation of life. Mipi olelim veyonkim yusad oz. From the mouth of infants and sucklings, we have found its strength. That the eternal spiritual world will be the basis for all human activity, and then our midot tovot, hamidot hatovot, our good qualities in their highest source, they will be mosadot lechayei hachevra hamishpacha v'hayachid. Those will be the impulses which will establish our social life, our family life, and our individual life. And and holiness will really be in the fullness of existence. So now I want to finish, and therefore, what Rav Kook is saying to each of us, and I want to, this is, well, I'll end with this piece and then we can discuss and everything. But he wrote like this, and I'm reading this as a call to each of us. This is Rav Kook speaking personally to all human beings who feel a sense of real spirit. Kri'a lehistaklut elyona, a call, a summons to a higher contemplation, a higher gazing. Im tirtzeh ben adam, if you will it, human being, histakel be'or hashchina b'chol hayekum, look, see the light of the divine presence in all existence. Histakel be'eden hachaim hashmeimim, observe the Edenic nature, the harmony of the heavenly realm. How this spreads forth into every corner of life. Spiritual and material, that are before our eyes of flesh, and that are before our eyes of spirit. Let us see the Or HaShechina, B'Kol HaYekum. Hitbonen bepla'ei hayetzira, reflect, contemplate on the wonders of creation. B'chayei ha'elohut shelahem, in their divine dimension. Lo betor eze tochnit keher shememechakim matzigim neged einecha, not as a dim configuration that is presented to us from afar. Ki im da et hametziut she'ata chai ba, this is the reality we're living in. Pla'ei hayetzira, Chayei ha'elohut. Da et atzmecha ve'et olamcha, know yourself and your world. Da et hoygonei halev shelcha, know the contemplations, the thoughts of the logic, the thoughts of your heart. Shel kol hogev v'shokev, and on every thinker and contemplator. Metzeh et mekor ha'chaim shebikirbecha, find the source of life that's within you. Ushemim'alecha, that's beyond you, Shemisvivecha, that is all around you, Et pa'arei hadrot ha'chaim, the splendor, the glorious splendor of life, She'ata sharui betocham, that we're immersed in. We have our being, we're living in this glorious splendor of existence. Ahava shebekirbech, kirbecha ha'eleota l'shorosh uzav ve'ednat tifarta. The love that's within us, extend it, elevate it to its source of its strength and the splendor and its noblest beauty. Harchiva lechol sarovtea, take the love and extend it to all dimensions. Lekol eshed nishmat chei ha'olamim, toward every manifestation of the soul that sustains the universe. It's only the splendor of the universe is only dimmed because of our deficiency in seeing it. But the universe is extraordinarily splendorous. Look at the lights in their inwardness. Don't let your soul be swallowed up by the names, the concepts, the letters, the categories, the isms. All the names of things, they're given to us. We're not given over to them. I'm a capitalist, I'm a socialist, I'm a this or this. All these categories and that we enslave ourselves to. Let not our soul be swallowed up by concepts. Aleh lemala aleh, let us rise up. Kikoch ozlacha, we have mighty powers. Yesh lecha kanfei ruach, we have wings of spirit. Kanfei nesharim aberim, wings of mighty angels. Al tikachesh bam pen yikachashu lecha, let's not deny them or they'll deny us. Drosh otam imtza'u lecha miyad, we'll seek for them, we immediately find them. Holy and precious are the forms that robe reality are precious and holy to us, and especially if we're limited in our spiritual perception. But as we approach of a life of enlightenment, we must not swerve from the perspective that light flows from the incomprehensible to the comprehensible, emanation from the light of the Ein Sof. Ve'anu kruim, and with this we'll end. Ve'anu kruim liot mitadnim ba'adanim shmeimim, and we are called to be Edenized in the heavenly Edens. B'chol prateya hakarot, in all its particular, all the proliferations of particularity, shebeklal hagadol hazeh, that are part of this great whole. Shemimenu totzaot kol hachaim, that from it has emerged and emerges all life. So may we be blessed, liot mitadnim ba'adanim hashmeimim, to be truly reach with the divine goodness that the divine will wishes for us, and that history is bringing us to. And may our learning bring healing to everybody on the planet Earth who needs healing in all the worlds of healing. And to Darabah for your attention.
Amen. Amen. Rav Yitzchak, Yasher Koach, thank you so much. So, Chavra, given our limited time, let's take a few comments, elaborations, questions from folks all at once, and then we'll give Rav Yitzchak the last word here. Just a reminder, this is the first part of a 10-part series. So don't forget to unmute yourself and jump in with a thought or question. Okay, I'm going to start then. While others, oh no, please, someone waving.
It's Nachum.
Good.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, please.
So in the background, you emphasize very much his tradition in Volozhin. You've mentioned his influence by the Zohar. I'm told that there was a strong influence that he was under also with Chassidut, which might come from the Zohar. Might you share how that influenced his thought as well? Or will that come out in some of the other lectures?
Okay, Yitzchak, before you respond, let's take a few more, if you'll just make a note of that, if you don't mind making a note, and then we'll hear a few more voices. Just give it the limited time. Okay, someone else?
And next time I'll end a little earlier, just the first time.
Okay,
covering a lot
no,
of it.
it's wonderful. There's so much to share. It's wonderful. Okay, let me jump in quick. And I'm sorry, this is such a basic question, but I'm a little stuck. So he's a panentheist. So HaKodesh Baruch Hu's in everything and beyond everything. And so I'm trying to understand what is the Kodesh. And you explained at one point, you said divine creation. Kodesh is divine. So everything is divine creation. And so where does human creativity kind of intersect with divine creation? And how does Kedusha play out in that
It's
interaction?
the source for human creativity.
Okay, that's all right. So any other questions or should let me respond to
Take
those?
maybe one or two more if we have.
Yeah, very quickly, Alekim Chicago. Just want to understand, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, it seems almost different than when we're learning every day from the Nevuchim Sefer.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to be starting from the big picture and going to the small picture. It doesn't seem very specific, Jewish specific. It seems to be universal, and then somehow it flows down into the Jews rather than the other way around, starting with Jewish nationalism, et cetera, and then expanding into helping the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an important observation. I'll address that.
Okay, do we have one more voice who wants to weigh in before we hand it back over?
So in terms of Hasidim, Rav Kook grew up on his mother's side Chabad. And when he was born, his mother made a bracha that he should be a great Rebbe, and his father made a bracha he should be a great Talmid Chacham. And then they end up saying, well, he was both. He basically integrated all the traditions that preceded him. He is the integrative voice of Torah. So there's people have written essays and books tracing. You can find his Chabad influences, particularly. He would Sudash Shlishi at Beit Arav. He would speak in the lashon of Chabad. So that way he started his most incredible Torahs were Sudash Shlishi at Beit Arav, and they would go on for quite a while sometimes. And he would often start with Chabad. So he's a great integrator. But Torah Sod, he's really the most expanded presentation of Kabbalah. That's what Rav Kook's writings is the most advanced presentation of Kabbalah. And he's taking the teachings of Kabbalah and taught them to all levels of existence, to many more topics than were covered before. Well, I guess the whole Kedusha in terms of Rav Shmuley, which the Kedusha, I mean, the Kodesh is the divine realm. That's like the Sphira of Keter, which is just Chochmah. We are, here in Asiyah and in Malchut in order to bring this into the physical experience. So there's a relationship between them, and the relationship from the Ein Sof to the Sof. The Yesh Mi'ayin, all that dynamic and what that's trying to describe is how we are here experiencing Kedusha, which then gives us a sense there is HaKadosh, because we're experiencing Kedusha here, so we know of the Kadosh. And then the link here that they made here in this is Kadosh is the Ratzon HaElyon. The way the next level is it's the Kedusha is sort of the Olam Ha'atz. It's the world of Olam Ha'atzilut HaEloki. That's the one description of the world of the Kadosh, the world of the divine emanation, where just purely the divine emanation, and then it descends into matter. This is really the source for before the descent into matter. The Klali, that's we can read almost these entire 5. This is his Torah Klali. There's nothing here that's only Jewish. He's describing here, these are the 5 foundational principles of existence. and they're equally true for every single human being in existence, and the process of bringing the world to its elevation and perfection is a process involving and for every single human being of existence. It's a universal process. Israel is here to serve the universal perfection, perfecting, tikkun olam, all of that. And so, but you're right, this one, that's the Nazir was presenting the universal principles in Rav Kook's teachings, and that was really his focus. Though within it, he has a lot about how Israel particularly is part of the universal. We serve the universal by being Israel, not by not being Israel.
Okay, this is very rich. Yasher Koach, Rav Yitzchak, thank you all so much for joining. We will see you next week. What day is today? Wednesday. Next Wednesday, 10 o'clock Pacific, 11 Mountain, noon Central, 1 Eastern, 8 p.m.
Jerusalem.
In Israel.
8 p.m.
And,
so thank you very
have a
much.
wonderful
I'm
day.
glad for the opportunity
Thank
to
you so
share,
Will do.
and I have a
Jerusalem.
website and all that stuff. We'll get that later. But thank you very much. And Rabbi Shmuley, huge yasher koach on everything you're doing, on all the levels.
Sorry
Just
for
being a part.
interrupting. Are you going to share these sources?
Yeah,
I was just going to
talking
ask the same thing.
Yeah.
I'd like
Hey,
to
AJ, we're gonna prepare them. Yes, tomorrow, AJ and I
It
are
would be
gonna
helpful
prepare
to
them.
see them. There was so much. I want to go over them again. I want to be able to feel them a little more closely. So,
Sure. No, it's yeah, and let me know if we do too much, because I mean, Rav Kook is huge. It's he's the largest. He is the largest thinker of the last couple of thousand
So I'll
years.
just say, I felt like you went through a lot of it quickly, and I wonder if there's time to do it a little more slowly and to be able to feel the language. But also, there are a lot of different people in the class. It's the first time I'm really learning Rav Kook, so I want an opportunity to try to feel.
Yeah, so maybe what I'll do is have, I can take that. That's maybe it's a matter of trying to be comprehensive but not overwhelming.
Right. Yeah. And if we see the text maybe in advance, if I would even see what you're going to teach next Wednesday, I would have a chance to look at it. So it would be familiar. That would be very helpful. So maybe
The text could be tied to each presentation, perhaps, so it's not overwhelming.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
As a teacher, it's the first time I'm being now I understand why my students want to see the texts in advance, because it gives them a chance to look, have
and especially Rav Kook is, well, you see what Rav Kook is. He's
all right, awesome. Well, thank you everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Shalom, shalom.
Bye.